And Ken, let's go ahead and start with last week first. When you had a chance to talk to the coaches, their reaction, was it kudos to Alamogordo, or did they feel like their team didn't do enough, or a combination of both from last Friday night's game?
It was really a combination of both. There was obviously some things that they felt that they could have done better, but they were very, obviously very gracious and complimentary of Alamogordo. I mean, it was, definitely wasn't any question as to whether or not the Tigers had shown any kind of quality.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it was an interesting game, and I think it surprised everybody that watched that one. Your reaction to the game as you were watching it, was it, what did you take away from it after the final whistle had blown?
I mean, considering, the one thing we talked about last week was their depth and the concerns with that. They lost Nate Nash, their starting running back and cornerback, 3 plays into the game. And it was from a previous injury. It was from an injury that he'd suffered in practice earlier in the week. But, the contingencies that they had for it obviously didn't cover, and they were kind of thrown into some chaos defensively. And then it just kind of crept into the offensive game as well. So, that's the thing I took away from it was, the thing that has been, I wrote about and that we talked about, is just that they're so thin that they don't really have, they don't have the personnel to deal with a loss like that. And then, Garrett Gibson, their quarterback, who's very important as far as, their production on offense. He's back there at free safety, and that's not something that they wanted going into the season, but, they haven't found a suitable replacement at that position, so he's out there on defense as well. So that's the thing I took away from it most.
Overall, kind of a tough week for the Valencia County teams. Valencia with the loss, Belen, real tough time with Artesia. Los Lunas probably had the best of the week, even though they kind of let one get away from them late against the defending 4A state champs in Farmington. Overall, the 3 teams certainly would like to, I don't necessarily forget week 1, but they certainly want to improve from week 1.
Yeah, I definitely, in talking to all the coaches, they're definitely looking to move forward. The Belen game was, the decisiveness, I think, was kind of unexpected. I mean, everyone knows Artesia's tough in Artesia. Bulldog Bowl is one of those places it's the Death Valley of New Mexico. It's one of those, storied places, and so, if you can go in there and even give them a game, it's sort of a moral victory. And so that was tough for Belen, and but they knew it was going to be tough. And then Los Lunas, coming up within, literally within minutes, a good half an hour of real time anyway, from upsetting the defending state champions. I mean, yeah, they're definitely feeling like they let one get away.
Talk about Coach Trantham's mindset coming out of that game against Farmington. Did he feel like his guys played well, or is it, as you mentioned, letting a big opportunity slip through their fingers?
Oh, it was a little both. I mean, they were very happy with the way that their young players responded. They've got a lot of inexperience. They really leaned on their seniors last year, and because of that, they didn't get a lot of playing time for a lot of the backups, and so he was really happy with that performance out there. And it really wasn't inexperience that lost them the game. The first touchdown that Farmington got back, it was just a great individual play by their quarterback, gave a really shifty run to the end zone and shook a couple of tacklers. And then the winning touchdown was, the defender for Los Lunas was right there. Coach Trantham said he was right there. He was in position. It was just a jump ball situation, and the guy from, the kid from Farmington came down with the ball. So, I think they were very heartened because they also weren't sure how their team was going to respond, and going on the road for your very first game with that kind of inexperience can be an adventure. But Coach Trantham was very proud of the effort, and despite the loss.
Talking with Kenn Rodriguez of the Valencia County News Bulletin. Tigers coming up this week. It's Los Lunas and Alamogordo over at Tiger Stadium, and Ken, nice enough to give us a little bit of a preview on Los Lunas. You mentioned just a little while ago, this is a team that lost a ton from last year. We got to see them up in Los Lunas last year, an exceptionally talented team in 2013. For these guys that are coming into this mix, What's the feeling on this group in terms of not so much experience, but talent-wise? Does this have a group that is comparable in certain positions in terms of guys that can really go out there and play the game?
It seems like the coaching staff definitely feels that there are certain positions that they're as talented and could be even more talented in the future. Obviously, you've got a sophomore starting running back in Omari Samuels, and they're very high on him. He did very well at a couple of the summer combines, and is just potential written all over him. He's pretty much the marquee player at this point. To a certain extent, he could end up being an upgrade at running back, and that's saying something because Jalen Chavez, in that tailback position last year was just really phenomenal. They've got kind of a platoon mentality going in on both on offense and defense, it seems like, from what Coach Trantham says. So they're trying to keep, fresh players in and also to get them experience. That's something that I guess, can work either for or against you as a coach. And the quarterback situation is very much changed. There started last year. Anthony Sanchez went down with an injury and was replaced by Darren Gallegos, who was a senior, and so he kind of led them through the season and was sort of a dual threat quarterback, but more of a runner than a passer. This year, they're running the option, so they've got have to have a dual threat quarterback situation. It seems like Ryan Klein, who's a senior this year, has stepped into the starting quarterback position role. He was kind of battling for that position last year, and then a sophomore, Hunter Wisniewski, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is also sharing time at quarterback, and so the quarterback situation has changed a bit. But they've, in talking to them in the preseason, they were very confident with all their quarterbacks. It was just kind of a matter of who wanted it more in those preseason workouts, and it seems like Klein and Wisniewski are the ones who've kind of shown the coaches what they want to see.
You talk about them running the options. Is them running the spread option, or is it more of a run-heavy option style? What kind of offense, at least in terms of what you saw preseason and what you expect to see the rest of the season?
It seems like they can kind of go with either. I would say it's probably closer to a spread option. It's obviously not a traditional option. It's not the wishbone. I guess you could compare it to like the kind of the flexibone formation that a lot of teams are using. They kind of switch it up. They try to give different kind of looks rather than something that you can kind of key on. But it's definitely option based. They pass pretty well out of it as well. So it's definitely not something that's predictable.
Defensively, it seemed like they had a pretty good week last week at Farmington. Is that maybe the strength of this group, or how does Coach Trantham feel? How do you feel about his defense going into the season? How do you feel coming out of week one?
It seemed like he was very confident in the defense coming into the season. They've played aggressively, for several years, and Coach Trantham didn't change that at all. And obviously the game against Farmington, they kept them scoreless for 3 quarters. They were able to force a couple of turnovers. They actually forced 4 fumbles and only came up with 2 of them. And that was one of the turning points he felt was if they could have gotten one of those other fumbles to go their way. So the defense at this point is definitely something that they can kind of rest their hat on. I think it's kind of equal. There's an equal distribution. Obviously, he came from Belen as their defensive coordinator, so there's going to be a defensive emphasis.
And it feels like, again, going into this week, both teams are probably going to look at, the matchup and say, hey, if we execute, we'll win this football game. I don't know if that's what you're hearing from the coaches there at Los Lunas. I imagine I'll probably hear the same kind of thing from the coaches here at Alamogordo. Is that kind of your feel on the game, that both teams feel like this is a winnable game from their perspective?
Yeah, and, I think that the thing in talking to Coach Trentham is in the preseason was that they're really looking at the pre-district as development for the district, and so they know that they have a tough schedule. They play Goddard next week, and they play them at home, but it's still Goddard. I think they're looking at developing this team. They're looking at a more long view approach. And trying to develop the team in time for district so that they can, compete for a district championship, which isn't to say that they're not looking at this in, as a game that they would want to win. I don't think they're quite looking at it in terms of winnable games. You know, I don't think the wins are not as important to them, it seems like, in the pre-district as development, because again, their focus is that district championship.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And of course, you know, district is just in a couple of weeks for them because they play 5 district games in 2014. So it'll be here before any of us know it. Same goes for Belen and Valencia. Well, we're looking forward to what I think is going to be a real competitive game between Los Lunas and Alamogordo. Kenn, thanks again this week for all the knowledge, and we'll look forward to maybe talking again down the road.
All right, thanks for having me on.